The kick lands before the scream. Leather sole to rib. A sharp, sickening sound, like breath being knocked out of a room. Nadira Cole hits the red carpet hard, her body sliding a few inches before stopping. The world tilts. Chandeliers blur into molten gold above her. Crystal glasses explode somewhere near her hand, the sharp smell of champagne cutting through the air. For one suspended moment, the Harrington Grand Ballroom forgets how to breathe. Then silence crashes down. Not the soft kind. The violent kind. The kind that arrives when 200 wealthy people realize something has gone terribly wrong and no one knows who's allowed to react. Nadira gasps, the sound thin and broken, fingers clawing at the carpet as pain blooms white-hot along her side. Her black silk gown, simple, understated, carefully chosen to disappear, has torn at the thigh. Glass glitters against her palm. Blood beads along her elbow, warm and unreal. The string quartet keeps playing. That's the worst part. Violins glide through the air as if nothing has happened, as if a woman hasn't just been kicked to the floor in the middle of a charity gala that raised 8 figures before dessert. She rolls onto her hip, fighting for air, chest burning. Each breath comes shallow, sharp. The smell of polish and perfume presses in from all sides. Leather shoes. Expensive cologne. Power. Above her, a shadow blocks the light. Julian Cross stands over her, one foot still half raised, jaw clenched, eyes burning with a fury she recognizes instantly. Her ex-husband. The man who walked away 3 years ago with her savings, her silence, and the quiet certainty that no one would ever stand up for her. Get up, Julian mutters, voice low, tight with disgust. You don't belong here. A ripple moves through the room. Someone inhales too loudly. Someone else drops a fork. Phones shift in hands, uncertain, hungry. Nadira blinks, trying to focus, the ceiling swimming above her. Her ribs scream when she moves. She presses her palm into the carpet, grounding herself, forcing breath into lungs that don't want to cooperate. She should have left. She should have turned around the moment she saw his name engraved in gold on the donor wall near the entrance. Should have slipped back into the night, into the anonymity she's learned to wear like armor. But she didn't. Julian leans closer, his tuxedo immaculate, his voice carrying just enough now for the nearest tables to hear. Always like this, he says. Always dramatic. Even broke, you still know how to make a scene. Broke. The word hits harder than the kick. Nadira's fingers curl into the carpet. Her jaw tightens. She tastes blood. From the corner of her vision, movement. 2 men step forward from the edge of the crowd. Dark suits. Broad shoulders. Their jackets hang open just enough for bold yellow letters to catch the chandelier light. FBI. They don't rush. They don't shout. They simply advance, slow and deliberate, as if the room itself belongs to them. Julian snorts, glancing at them with open contempt. What is this? He scoffs. You hire cops now? That's low, even for you. One of the men speaks, voice calm, even. Sir, step back. Julian doesn't. Instead, he shifts his weight, leaning down toward Nadira, his shadow swallowing her. You really think this matters? He whispers. You think anyone here cares about you? Nadira lifts her gaze. Her eyes meet his. There is no panic in them. No pleading. Only something quiet. Something steady. You shouldn't have done that, she says. The words are barely louder than the music. Julian laughs. A sharp, dismissive sound. Oh, don't start, he says. You always loved playing the victim. Behind him, the room changes. Not loudly. Not obviously. But people are standing now. Chairs scrape softly against marble. The quartet falters, the music thinning, notes stretching too long before dying altogether. One of the FBI agents touches his earpiece. Yes, he says quietly. She's here. Julian's laughter stutters. He glances over his shoulder, irritation flickering into something else. She, he repeats. The agent doesn't look at him. He looks at Nadira. Yes, he says again. She's hurt. The words land like a switch flipping. A woman near the front table covers her mouth. Someone else lowers their phone, face pale. A man in a tailored suit near the stage straightens abruptly, already pulling his own phone from his pocket. Julian's confidence wavers, just for a fraction of a second. Nadira reaches for her clutch, lying inches from her hand. Her fingers tremble as she pull it closer, ignoring the spike of pain that shoots through her side. Inside the small black bag, her phone vibrates. Once. She freezes. Julian notices, his mouth curling. Calling for help now, he sneers. Figures. The vibration stops. The ballroom doors at the far end of the hall open. Not slammed. Opened. A hush rolls through the room so fast it feels physical, pressing against skin, against lungs. Men in black suits enter first, scanning the space with practiced precision. Their eyes move constantly, mapping exits, angles, threats. They don't acknowledge the crowd. They don't need to. Then he walks in. Tall. Composed. Impossibly still. The chandeliers reflect off his cufflinks as he crosses the room with unhurried certainty, his gaze fixed on one point and one point only. Nadira. Her chest loosens. Just a little. He kneels beside her without hesitation, his presence blocking out everything else. The noise. The crowd. Julian. Does it hurt when you breathe? He asks quietly. Yes, she answers, honest. His jaw tightens. He slips off his jacket and drapes it over her shoulders, the weight of it grounding, familiar. His hand lingers at her back for half a second longer than necessary, steady, protective. Only then does he stand. Only then does he turn. Julian stares at him, confusion written plainly across his face. Who the hell are you? He demands. The man regards him calmly, as if Julian is already a problem solved. My name, he says evenly, his voice carrying effortlessly through the silent ballroom, is Elias Mercer. The reaction is immediate. Gasps. Whispers. A collective intake of breath. Julian's face drains of color. Elias doesn't look away. And the woman you just kicked, he continues, his tone unchanged, is my wife. The silence that follows is absolute. Julian opens his mouth. Nothing comes out. Nadira watches it happen, the moment realization crawls across his face, slow and horrifying. The FBI. The deference. The name he skimmed past on donor lists without noticing. The man he should have feared. Her phone vibrates again. Twice. A countdown has started. And Julian Cross still doesn't understand how badly he's misjudged the situation. If you're still here, still watching, don't look away now. Because what happens next is exactly why silence protects abusers, and why staying matters. Nadira meets Julian's eyes one last time and says softly. You shouldn't have done that. The silence stretches. Not the brittle, stunned hush of the ballroom, but a deeper one, inside Nadira's chest, where the past has been holding its breath for 3 years. Julian's face blurs at the edges as memory pulls her under. It always starts the same way. With the apartment. A narrow third-floor walk-up that smells like old cooking oil and damp drywall. The lock already changed when she comes home from work. Her key useless in her hand. The hallway light flickers, buzzing faintly, as if even the building is tired of witnessing what's about to happen. She remembers standing there with a grocery bag cutting into her fingers. Rice. Canned beans. A rotisserie chicken she bought because it was marked down and because Julian liked it that way, still warm, still whole, something that felt like a meal instead of survival. She remembers knocking. Once. Twice. No answer. Inside, drawers are open. Closets stripped bare. The couch gone. The television missing, leaving a pale rectangle on the wall where it used to be. Even the cheap framed photos she bought at a thrift store, gone. Julian didn't just leave. He erased himself. Her phone buzzes in her memory, just like it does now. One voicemail. His voice smooth, practiced, already detached. I can't do this anymore, Nadira. You'll be fine. You always are. Always. As if resilience were a favor she owed him. She sinks onto the bare floor that night, back against the wall, grocery bag tipped over beside her. The chicken rolls free, cooling fast. Grease spreads across the tile in a widening stain she doesn't have the energy to clean. The bank app refreshes. Balance, $14.82. He took the rest. Every joint account. Every emergency fund she built dollar by dollar. The money she hid in envelopes, thinking it made her careful, thinking it made her safe. The eviction notice arrives 3 days later. The ink smells sharp and new. Final notice. Court date circled in red. Julian's signature still on the lease, his name cleanly crossed out, hers left alone. She packs what fits into 2 trash bags. Clothes folded small. Shoes wrapped in towels. Her mother's old scarf, frayed but soft, tucked carefully into the side pocket like a talisman. When she leaves the building for the last time, the door slams harder than necessary behind her. The sound echoes. That's when she disappears. Not dramatically. Not with a farewell or a public breakdown. She disappears the way people without options do, quietly, completely. Secret number 1 is not that she was weak. It's that she was protecting something. Someone. Nadira doesn't go to friends. She doesn't post online. She doesn't ask for help. Julian made sure of that, too, in the months before he left, subtle comments, quiet isolations, a steady erosion of the bridges she once had. Instead, she goes to a storage facility on the edge of town. A place that smells like dust and rust and old cardboard. She rents the smallest unit they have and sleeps in her car, curled in the back seat, knees pressed to her chest. The nights are the worst. The hum of traffic. The ache in her spine. The way hunger gnaws until it feels like another organ entirely. She drinks water to quiet it. She sleeps in layers to stay warm. She keeps the engine off to save gas, breath fogging the windows in shallow bursts. Weeks pass. She showers in public restrooms. She washes her clothes in a sink, wrings them out with hands that shake from exhaustion. She takes extra shifts when she can, smiles when customers are cruel, pretends she isn't counting every dollar before she buys a sandwich. And through it all, she stays silent. Because Julian didn't just leave her broke. He left her with a choice. Before he walked out, there was a conversation, one she never repeats, one she locks away like a bruise no one is allowed to touch. He sat at the kitchen table that night, fingers steepled, voice calm in a way that made her stomach drop. "If you make this messy," he said, "I'll make sure you regret it." She didn't understand at first. Then he slid a folder across the table. Papers inside. Legal language. Threats disguised as options. "Sign, or I take everything, including the thing you're trying to protect." She signed. That's why she disappeared. Not because she lost. Because she chose containment over annihilation. Because sometimes survival means swallowing your voice until it cuts going down. There is an emotional silence that lives in those years. It's not loud. It's the quiet of watching the world continue without you. The quiet of standing in line at a food pantry, eyes on the floor. The quiet of birthdays passing unnoticed. The quiet of realizing no one is coming to save you. Nadira remembers one night in particular. Rain hammering the roof of her car. Her phone dead. Her body aching so badly she can't find a position that doesn't hurt. She presses her forehead to the steering wheel and closes her eyes, breathing through waves of pain and fear and anger she doesn't have space to feel. She doesn't cry. She just sits. And waits for morning. That's how she survives. Not with triumph. With endurance. Eventually, things shift, not magically, not quickly. A job offer that doesn't ask too many questions. A room to rent with a lock that works. A bank balance that crawls upward, $10 at a time. Her spine straightens. Her voice returns, slowly, carefully, like a limb learning how to move again. Julian never checks. He doesn't ask where she went. Doesn't follow up. Doesn't wonder if she's alive. In his mind, she fades. Becomes a cautionary tale. A footnote. A woman he outgrew. That's why, years later, at a glittering gala under crystal chandeliers, he can look at her and see nothing but the ghost of someone he already buried. The memory snaps. Hard. Nadira's breath catches as the present slams back into place. The ballroom. The crowd. The weight of Elias's jacket around her shoulders. And Julian. Still standing over her. Still looming. Still convinced she is exactly who he left behind. His mouth moves, forming words she can't quite hear yet, the past and present blurring at the edges as pain pulses through her ribs. She looks up at him from the floor, meeting his eyes with the full weight of everything he never bothered to learn. The last thing Julian ever said to her before he walked out echoes in her head, clear as day. "No one will ever choose you the way I did." Nadira exhales slowly. And the story cuts back to now, to the red carpet, to the watching crowd, to Julian Cross still looming, utterly unaware that the woman he thought he destroyed is about to prove him wrong in every possible way. The room doesn't erupt. It tilts. Power doesn't always announce itself with noise. Sometimes it moves the way pressure does, quiet, invisible, bending everything around it until the structure can't hold the same shape anymore. Nadira feels it first in the air. The temperature seems to drop, just a degree or two, enough to raise goosebumps along her arms beneath Elias's jacket. The scent of perfume and polished with thins, replaced by something sharper, metal, adrenaline, the unmistakable edge of authority entering a space that was never meant to contain it. Julian is still talking. She can tell by the way his mouth keeps moving, by the way his hand gestures grow wider, more defensive. But the sound of his voice fades under the low murmur spreading through the ballroom like a slow tide. Whispers pass from table to table. Eyes shift. People who moments ago were leaning back in their chairs now sit forward, spine straight, hands folded too neatly. A woman near the front clutches her clutch with both hands, knuckles whitening. A man at the bar quietly sets his glass down and steps away from it, as if he suddenly remembers he has somewhere else to be. The string quartet stumbles. The violinist's bow drags a half-second too long across the strings, producing a thin, strained note that slices through the air. The cellist hesitates, fingers faltering, before the entire piece dissolves into an awkward, incomplete ending. No one applauds. Silence rushes in to fill the gap. It presses against Nadira's ears, heavy and intimate. She hears the shallow hitch of her own breath. The distant hum of the HVAC system. The faint clink of glass as a waiter's hand trembles while clearing a table that no one is sitting at anymore. The FBI agents move. Not dramatically. Not aggressively. They reposition the way professionals do when they expect something to break. One steps to Nadira's left, placing his body just slightly between her and Julian. Another angles toward the aisle, cutting off a clear path to the exit. A third drifts closer to the stage, scanning the balconies above as if mapping unseen threats. Their movements are smooth, practiced, almost lazy, but the intent beneath them is unmistakable. Containment. Julian notices. His voice falters mid-sentence. His brow creases as irritation sharpens into suspicion. What is this? He snaps, glancing around. Why are they standing like that? No one answers him. That's new. Julian has always been used to responses, people explaining themselves to him, justifying their discomfort, laughing off his sharp edges. He thrives on the immediate feedback loop of dominance. This silence offers him nothing. Nadira watches his confidence erode in micro-expressions, the tightening of his jaw, the way his shoulders pull back a fraction too far, the restless shift of his weight from one foot to the other. He senses the shift but doesn't understand it. The crowd does. Social gravity changes direction. People subtly angle their bodies away from Julian, creating distance without appearing to move. Chairs are nudged back. Space opens around him in a widening circle, an unspoken consensus rippling outward, don't be too close. Don't be seen standing with him. Nadira feels the spatial tension like a physical thing. She is still low to the ground, the red carpet rough beneath her fingertips, but the space around her tightens protectively. Elias remains close, his presence a steady anchor at her back. The FBI agents form a loose perimeter, not obvious, but deliberate. Julian is suddenly very alone. You think this is funny? He says, his voice louder now, edged with something brittle. You all going to stand there like she's some kind of... He stops. Because one of the agents turns toward Nadira and speaks. Ma'am, the agent says calmly, are you able to stand, or do you need medical assistance? The word lands like a dropped glass. Ma'am. It slices through the room, through Julian, through the fragile illusion he's been clinging to since the moment he lifted his foot. Nadira doesn't answer right away. She watches Julian's face as the word registers, watches confusion ripple into disbelief. His mouth opens, closes. He looks from the agent to her, searching for context that refuses to appear. Ma'am is not what you call someone who doesn't matter. Ma'am is respect. Recognition. Rank. Julian laughs once, short and sharp, but the sound dies quickly, unsupported. You can't be serious, he says. You don't know her. She's... The agent doesn't look at him. He keeps his attention on Nadira, waiting patiently, as if Julian's voice is nothing more than background noise. That's when Nadira understands. This isn't about convincing anyone. The decision has already been made. I can stand, she says finally, her voice steady despite the pain flaring along her side. But I'll need a moment. Elias's hand tightens at her elbow, warm and grounding. He adjusts his stance, subtly shifting so his body shields hers more fully from Julian's line of sight. The agent nods. Take your time. Julian's breathing grows audible. He rubs a hand through his hair, tuxedo sleeves creasing as his movements lose their polished ease. This is insane, he mutters. I didn't do anything. She fell. You all saw it. No one responds. Phones are up now, but not pointed at Nadira. They're pointed at him. A man near the back lowers his phone when Julian's eyes catch his, guilt flashing before he looks away. Another guest slips quietly toward the exit, heels clicking too fast against marble. The room feels smaller. The walls closer. The chandeliers no longer look decorative, they look like witnesses. Nadira shifts her weight, wincing as pain lances through her ribs. Elias studies her without a word, his thumb pressing reassuringly into the small of her back. She doesn't look at Julian anymore. She doesn't need to. The crowd has begun to decide who this story belongs to. A murmur rises, soft at first, then building as whispers overlap. Names are exchanged under breaths. Eyes dart toward Elias, toward the agents, toward Nadira herself. Recognition spreads. Not full understanding, not yet, but enough. Julian senses it slipping. He takes a step forward, then stops when one of the agents subtly mirrors the movement, closing the distance just enough to block him. "Sir," the agent says evenly, "I need you to stay where you are." Julian stares at him. "Or what?" The agent doesn't answer. He doesn't have to. Because at that exact moment, the double doors at the far end of the Harrington Grand Ballroom begin to open. Slowly. Deliberately. Every head turns. The hinges whisper as polished wood parts, revealing a spill of light from the corridor beyond. The murmur dies instantly, swallowed by anticipation so thick it feels like it might choke the room. Nadira lifts her gaze. Whatever is about to enter, she knows one thing with absolute certainty. This night is no longer under Julian Cross's control. And the ballroom doors are fully open. The doors finish opening. Nothing rushes in. No shouting. No announcement. No spectacle. Just space. The corridor beyond the ballroom spills soft white light across the polished marble floor, cutting a clean line through the red carpet. For a breathless second, the light sits there untouched, as if waiting for permission to move. Then footsteps. Measured. Unhurried. Precise. The sound carries farther than it should. Leather soles against stone. Each step deliberate enough that the entire room seems to adjust its rhythm around it. Conversations die mid-thought. Phones lower without anyone consciously deciding to do so. Men enter first, 3 of them, dressed in dark suits that don't shine under chandeliers because they're not meant to. Their eyes move constantly, not searching for admiration, but for angles, exits, threats. They spread out instinctively, not blocking the view, not drawing attention. They don't look like security. They look like certainty. Then he walks in. Tall, composed, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that absorbs the light instead of reflecting it. No visible jewelry beyond a watch with a face so clean it almost disappears against his wrist. His posture is relaxed, but nothing about him is casual. The stillness he carries is the kind that belongs to men who are used to rooms rearranging themselves around their presence. He doesn't scan the crowd. He doesn't need to. His eyes lock immediately on Nadira. The world narrows. The noise that had been pressing against her ears recedes, replaced by the low, steady thrum of her pulse. Her breath catches, not from fear this time, but from the sudden release of something she's been holding too tightly for too long. He closes the distance between them in long, even strides. No one stops him. People step aside without realizing they're doing it. Chairs scrape softly as bodies lean back, creating a path that wasn't there a moment ago. The FBI agents shift again, subtly widening the perimeter, not to block him, but to make space. He kneels in front of her. The movement is smooth, practiced, unhurried. His knee touches the carpet. His presence fills the space in front of her, blocking out Julian, the crowd, the chaos. For the first time since the kick landed, Nadira feels grounded. "You're bleeding," he says quietly. His voice is calm, steady, pitched low enough that it feels like it belongs only to the 2 of them. No anger bleeds through yet. No questions. Just observation. "It's not bad," she replies, though her ribs protest the lie with a sharp pulse of pain. His gaze flicks briefly to her elbow, to the tear in her dress, to the way she's favoring one side. His jaw tightens, not dramatically, just enough to register. "Does it hurt when you breathe?" he asks. "Yes." He exhales slowly through his nose. Then, without ceremony, he slips his jacket from his shoulders and drapes it around her, the weight familiar, anchoring. The fabric is warm from his body. It smells faintly of clean linen and something darker beneath it, wood, spice, a note she's learned to associate with safety. He adjusts it carefully, making sure it covers her shoulders, shields the torn silk, creates a barrier between her and the room. The gesture is intimate without being possessive. Protective without being loud. His hand rests briefly at the small of her back, fingers pressing in gentle reassurance. Nadira feels the tremor in her chest ease, just a fraction. Around them, the ballroom holds its breath. No one speaks. No one moves. The silence deepens, not the shocked hush from before, but something heavier. Reverent. As if the room has collectively decided this moment belongs to him. He rises. Slowly. The shift in perspective is immediate. Standing, he seems even taller, his presence expanding as he turns, finally, toward Julian. Julian stares at him openly now, confusion etched across his face. His mouth tightens, then curves into a brittle smirk as he tries to reclaim ground that's already slipping away. "Who the hell are you?" Julian demands, voice loud enough to cut through the quiet. A few heads turn sharply at the tone. Julian doesn't notice. He's still operating under old rules, the ones where volume equals control, where intimidation fills gaps left by uncertainty. The man regards him calmly. Not dismissively. Not aggressively. As if Julian is a detail that requires clarification, not concern. For a long beat, he says nothing. The pause stretches, deliberate and uncomfortable. It forces attention, bends it, pulls every eye toward the space between the two men. Julian shifts under it, his smirk faltering. "I asked you a question," he snaps. "This doesn't involve you." The man finally speaks. "My name is Elias Mercer," he says. The effect is immediate. It ripples outward, visible in the way shoulders stiffen, in the sharp intake of breath from the front tables, in the way a woman near the stage instinctively reaches for the back of her chair as if to steady herself. Whispers erupt, hushed, urgent, overlapping. Julian's expression freezes. The name doesn't land all at once for him. It arrives in fragments, recognition flickering at the edges, something he's heard before but never bothered to remember. "Okay," Julian scoffs, forcing a laugh. "Good for you. I don't care who you are. This is between me and her." He gestures vaguely toward Nadira without looking at her, already dismissing her again, already convinced this is a misunderstanding he can tuck his way out of. Elias doesn't react. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't step closer. He simply stands there, hands relaxed at his sides, allowing the room to continue reacting for him. The FBI agents remain still, but their attention sharpens. One of them glances briefly toward Elias, waiting, not for instruction, but for confirmation. Elias gives none. He doesn't need to. Julian notices the glance. His laugh comes out thinner this time. "This is ridiculous," he mutters. "She's nobody. She doesn't." That's when Elias moves. Just a step. Not toward Julian. Toward Nadira. The subtlety of it is devastating. He places himself slightly in front of her, not blocking her from view, but positioning his body so that Julian would have to go through him to reach her. The message is wordless and absolute. Julian's confidence cracks. "You're overreacting," Julian says, though his voice has lost some of its edge. "She fell. You don't know her." Elias turns his head just enough to look back at Nadira. "Are you okay?" he asks her. The question is simple. Direct. Entirely focused on her. She nods once. "I will be." His gaze lingers on her for half a second longer, reading what she isn't saying, absorbing the tension still coiled in her posture. Then he looks back at Julian. The silence stretches again. This time, it feels like a countdown. Julian clears his throat, visibly unsettled by the lack of reaction. "Look," he says, attempting reason, "we can all calm down. This doesn't have to be a thing." Elias tilts his head slightly, considering him. When he speaks, his voice carries effortlessly through the ballroom, low, controlled, edged with something that makes people straighten without understanding why. "That woman," he says, each word deliberate, unmistakable, "is my wife." The words don't echo. They sink. "My wife." For a fraction of a second, nothing happens. The ballroom remains frozen in the same breathless stillness, as if the air itself is waiting to see who will move first. Then reality catches up. It hits Julian in stages, never all at once. First, confusion drains from his face, replaced by disbelief so sharp it almost looks like offense. His mouth opens, a laugh forming out of habit, out of muscle memory. But the sound doesn't come. Because the room reacts before he can. A woman near the donor tables inhales sharply, one hand flying to her chest. A man in a navy tux whispers Elias's name under his breath, eyes wide now, no longer curious, calculating. Someone at the back of the room quietly steps away from Julian as if proximity itself has become a liability. Julian notices. He looks around, searching for reassurance that never arrives. He starts, then stops, clearing his throat. That's not funny. Elias doesn't move. He stands exactly where he is, shoulders relaxed, expression unreadable. He doesn't repeat himself. He doesn't clarify. He doesn't need to. The truth is already doing the work. Julian's gaze flicks to Nadira, still partially shielded by Elias's body, still wrapped in that jacket like a line she's finally allowed to stand behind. For the first time, Julian really looks at her, not as a problem, not as a nuisance, but as a variable he failed to account for. His breathing quickens. You're lying, he says, too fast. This is some kind of stunt. No one laughs with him. The FBI agent nearest to Elias steps forward, his presence suddenly more pronounced, more official. Sir, the agent says evenly, I need you to keep your voice down. Julian spins toward him. On what authority? The agent doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't shift his stance. Federal, he replies simply. The word drops heavy. Julian's jaw tightens. He opens his mouth again, then closes it. His eyes dart to the exits, to the agents now very clearly positioned to control them. How much time? Elias asks quietly. The agent glances at his watch. 7 minutes, sir. 7. The number hangs there, precise and unforgiving. Julian frowns. 7 minutes for what? Elias doesn't answer him. He doesn't have to. The agent does. We're clearing the room, the agent says. Media, guests, staff. Everyone who isn't essential will be escorted out. Murmurs erupt immediately, sharper now, edged with panic and excitement in equal measure. Phones rise again, only to be gently, but firmly, pressed back down by agents moving through the crowd. No recordings, one of them says calmly. This area is now restricted. Julian's pulse begins to show in his throat. You can't just, he starts. This is a public event. It was, the agent replies. That single syllable lands like a verdict. Nadira feels the shift settle deep in her bones. This isn't chaos. This is procedure. Elias turns slightly, angling his body back toward her. Do you want medical here, he asks quietly, or do you want to stand with me while they clear the room? The choice matters. He makes sure she knows that. I can stand, she says again, firmer this time. He nods, offering his arm. She takes it, pushing through the pain in her ribs as she rises. The room seems to tilt back into alignment as she comes to her feet, taller now, steadier, no longer looking up at anyone. Julian takes an involuntary step back. No, he says, shaking his head. This is insane. You're all overreacting. I didn't even. His voice trails off as one of the agents steps directly between him and Nadira. Sir, the agent says, you need to stay where you are. Julian swallows. You don't understand. The sentence dies unfinished. Because something clicks. Not all of it, but enough. Julian's gaze sharpens, narrowing on Nadira's face, on the calm she hasn't lost, on the way no one is asking her to explain herself. You planned this, he says suddenly, accusation rushing in to fill the void where control used to live. This whole thing. Showing up here. Making a scene. Nadira meets his eyes. She doesn't deny it. She doesn't confirm it either. Elias speaks instead. No, he says. You did. Julian turns back to him, desperation bleeding through his posture now. Look, man, he says, lowering his voice, attempting reason. You don't know the whole story. Elias studies him. Then tell it, he says. The words are quiet. Inviting. Julian seizes on them like a lifeline. She disappeared, he blurts. Just vanished. I tried to help her. I did. You don't know what she's like when... Stop, Elias says. The word is soft. Final. Julian freezes. The room continues emptying around them, guests ushered out through side exits, their whispers growing more frantic as they're cut off mid-curiosity. Chairs scrape. Footsteps retreat. The ballroom slowly sheds its audience until only a handful of figures remain, agents, Elias, Nadira, Julian. And the space between them grows heavier with each passing second. Julian exhales sharply, running a hand through his hair. You're making a mistake, he says, quieter now. There are things you don't know. Things about her. About what she? Elias watches him closely. Not with anger. With assessment. 7 minutes, the agent murmurs again. Julian's eyes flick to the doors as they close behind the last group of guests. The sound is unmistakable. Solid. Final. Somewhere in Julian's past, long buried, carefully hidden, something stirs. A pattern. A trail he assumed no one ever followed. Nadira feels it too, the subtle tightening in Elias's grip, the way his posture shifts, preparing. Secret number 2 isn't spoken. But it breathes. It lives in the hesitation now creeping into Julian's voice, in the way his explanations trip over themselves, in the sudden understanding dawning across his face that this isn't just about tonight. This is about everything he thought he got away with. The last guests disappear through the side corridor. The agent nods once. The ballroom doors slide shut. And then, with a heavy, deliberate sound that reverberates through the empty space, the locks engage. Click. The countdown ends. And whatever happens next will have no witnesses. The lock echoes longer than it should. Metal sliding into place. A finality that settles into the empty ballroom like dust after a collapse. The space feels enormous now, too large for 4 people, too quiet for what's about to happen. Chandeliers hum faintly overhead. The red carpet stretches out in both directions, unmarked except for the scuff place where Nadira fell. Somewhere, far beyond the walls, the city continues without them. Julian swallows. The sound is loud. No, he says quickly, stepping back as if distance might save him. You can't just keep me here. This is illegal. The FBI agent closest to him doesn't move. Sir, he says evenly, you're not under arrest. Julian exhales, relief flashing across his face. Yet, the agent adds. The relief collapses. Elias releases Nadira's arm but doesn't step away. He turns just enough to face her fully, his body angled so Julian remains in his peripheral vision. The jacket still rests around her shoulders, heavy and reassuring. Are you steady? Elias asks quietly. Yes, she says. He studies her face, reading the small tells she doesn't bother hiding, the tightness at the corners of her mouth, the way she favors one side, the measured calm she uses when she's bracing for impact. He nods once. Then he looks at Julian. Tell me, Elias says, voice low, unhurried. What happened? Julian barks out a laugh that sounds wrong in the empty room. You saw it. She tripped. She came at me. Tell me, Elias repeats. Not louder. Sharper. Julian's shoulders tense. His gaze flicks to Nadira, irritation flaring. You're letting her manipulate you, he says. She's always been good at that. Elias doesn't respond. He waits. The silence stretches, taut and deliberate. It presses against Julian's chest, forces him to fill it. She disappeared, Julian says finally, words tumbling out faster now. No explanation. No goodbye. Just, gone. I tried to help her. I did. You don't know what she was like back then. Unstable. Always making things bigger than they were. Nadira watches him talk. Watches the familiar choreography, the way he reframes abandonment as concern, theft as necessity, cruelty as frustration. He's performing a version of the truth he's rehearsed for years. Elias lets him finish. When Julian runs out of breath, Elias turns to Nadira. Is that accurate? He asks. The question is gentle. It matters that it's gentle. Nadira doesn't answer right away. She looks at the far wall, at the reflection of chandeliers in the polished surface, at the faint smear where champagne spilled earlier. She feels the ache in her ribs, the pull of the past tightening around her throat. Then she speaks. He emptied our accounts, she says. Everyone. Joint and personal. Julian scoffs. That's not. And before he left, she continues, not raising her voice, he presented me with documents. Threats dressed as choices. Julian's eyes flash. You signed those? Yes, Nadira says. Because you told me what would happen if I didn't. Elias's attention sharpens. What would have happened, he asks. Julian's jaw tightens. She's exaggerating. Nadira turns to him then, really looks at him, and for the first time that night, she addresses him directly. You told me, she says, that if I made noise, you'd make sure I lost everything that mattered. Julian shakes his head. I was angry. People say things. You showed me proof, she says. Names. Numbers. Places you could reach. The room stills. Elias's gaze flicks briefly to the FBI agents. One of them shifts, attention sharpening further. Julian's confidence fractures. That was nothing, he says quickly. Bluffing. You believed it because you wanted to. Nadira's voice doesn't waver. I believed it because you'd already done it before. Elias holds Julian's gaze. Before what? Julian opens his mouth. Closes it. The silence deepens, heavy and intimate. It presses down until it's impossible to pretend it isn't there. Nadira inhales slowly. Secret number 2 doesn't arrive like a confession. It arrives like a ledger being opened. He didn't just take money from me, she says. I wasn't the first. Julian's head snaps up. Don't. Elias doesn't interrupt her. There were others, Nadira continues. Women who trusted him. Women whose names I learned later, after I disappeared. Patterns I recognized because I lived them. Julian's voice cracks. You don't know that. I do, she says. Because when I finally spoke, quietly, carefully, people listened. Not publicly. Not yet. But enough to confirm what I already suspected. Elias exhales slowly through his nose. Julian takes a step forward, desperation bleeding through now. This is insane, he says. You're going to destroy my life over a misunderstanding. Elias finally responds to him. You did that yourself, he says. Julian laughs weakly. You think you're some kind of hero? Elias considers the question. No, he says. I think I'm responsible. The words hang there. Responsible. For his wife. For the truth. For what happens next. Julian's bravado collapses further. You can't prove any of this, he says. You think a few stories. The FBI agent clears his throat. Julian stops. Sir, the agent says calmly, we've already confirmed irregularities in multiple accounts linked to your name. Julian's face drains of color. That's not, he swallows. That's not what this is about. Elias watches him carefully. It is now, he says. Another silence. Longer this time. Elias turns back to Nadira. The shift is subtle but profound. The room seems to recede as he focuses on her alone. This doesn't have to go further, he says quietly. Not tonight. Not ever. I need to know what you want. The words land with weight. Consent. Agency. The power isn't assumed. It's offered. Nadira feels it settle in her chest, warm and terrifying all at once. She thinks of the nights in her car, the quiet decisions she made to survive. She thinks of signing those papers. Of disappearing without explanation. Of carrying everything alone because no one asked her what she wanted. Until now. Julian senses the shift and lunges for it. You don't want this, he says quickly, voice breaking. You're better than this. We can fix it. I'll apologize. Elias raises a hand. Julian stops mid-sentence. Elias looks at Nadira, his voice low enough that it feels like a private moment carved out of chaos. Do you want me to stop? He asks. The room holds its breath. Nadira looks at Julian. At the man who thought silence meant permission. At the man who mistook her survival for weakness. She feels the ache in her ribs. The weight of the jacket. The steadiness of Elias's presence beside her. She thinks of everything she swallowed to stay alive. And then she answers. No. The word hangs in the air. No. It doesn't echo. It doesn't need to. Elias nods once, as if he expected the answer all along. There is no triumph in his expression, no flare of satisfaction, only resolve settling into place like a final piece of a mechanism clicking home. Understood, he says quietly. The FBI agent nearest to him taps his watch. The countdown completes. 7 minutes becomes 0. What happens next unfolds without raised voices, without spectacle. Power, Nadira realizes, doesn't need volume. It moves through systems. Through doors already unlocked. Through people who've been waiting for permission to act. Elias turns slightly toward the agents. Proceed. That's all. Julian stares at him. Proceed with what? The agent doesn't answer right away. He lifts a hand to his earpiece, listening. His face remains impassive, but something sharpens behind his eyes, focus narrowing, calculations aligning. Accounts are frozen, he says after a moment. Corporate and personal. Julian laughs reflexively. That's impossible. Another agent speaks, this one holding a tablet angled just enough for Julian to see the screen light up. Lines of text scroll past, account numbers, timestamps, authorization flags. Effective immediately, the agent says, all assets linked to Julian Cross are under review. Julian's laughter falters. Review for what? He demands. Forensic irregularities, the agent replies. Patterns consistent with fraud. Nadira feels the room tilt again, not from shock this time, but from recognition. Secret number 3 surfaces quietly. It's not just about what Julian did to her. It's about how long he's been doing it. Julian shakes his head, backing away as if space itself might argue on his behalf. You don't have proof. You can't just. We do, the agent says. He gestures to the tablet, swiping once. A list appears, names blurred, dates highlighted, transactions marked with small red flags. Multiple complainants, the agent continues. Similar timelines. Similar losses. Julian's eyes dart to Nadira. You did this, he says hoarsely. You went behind my back. She doesn't respond. Elias does. She survived you, he says. Others didn't know how. Julian's mouth opens. Closes. His hands tremble as he clenches them into fists, then releases them again, as if unsure what to do with them now that intimidation has failed. This is a misunderstanding, he says weakly. I can explain everything. Elias studies him for a long moment. You already did, he says. You just didn't realize you were confessing. The FBI agents move again. One steps toward Julian, not to restrain him, but to claim space, close enough that Julian has to tilt his head back to maintain eye contact. Another agent positions himself near the exits, though there's nowhere left to go. Julian's phone buzzes. Once. He ignores it. Then it buzzes again. He flinches this time, eyes flicking downward. His hand moves toward his pocket, hesitates. The agent nods. You might want to answer that. Julian pulls the phone out. The screen lights up with a flood of missed calls, numbers he recognizes instantly. His business partner. His attorney. An unknown number with a familiar area code. His breathing quickens. He answers the first call. Yes, he snaps, trying to reclaim control. I'm busy. A voice erupts from the speaker, too loud, too frantic. What did you do? The voice demands. The bank just froze everything. Our investors are calling. We're exposed. Julian's face drains of color. That's a mistake, he says. It'll be sorted. The voice laughs bitterly. Sorted? They're pulling records. Someone tipped them off. Julian's gaze snaps to Nadira again. He ends the call and immediately another one comes through. This time, the name makes his stomach drop. He answers. What? He says, barely above a whisper now. The voice on the other end is colder. Older. Measured. We need to talk, it says. Immediately. Julian swallows. Now isn't. It is, the voice cuts in. Because if this goes public, you're done. The line goes dead. Julian stands there, phone pressed to his ear, eyes unfocused, as if the room has begun to tilt in a way he can't correct. This isn't fair, he says suddenly, voice cracking. You don't understand what this will do to me. Nadira watches him unravel. Not with satisfaction. With clarity. This is what you did to us, she says quietly. Just slower. Elias glances at her, then back to Julian. You had choices, he says. You used them. Julian's phone buzzes again. And again. And again. Calls stack on the screen faster than he can decline them. Messages flood in, alerts, notifications, automated warnings from institutions that once bent around his name. His reputation begins collapsing in real time. He tries to speak, to argue, to bargain, but each new vibration steals a little more air from his lungs. Please, he says, finally looking at Nadira instead of Elias. You don't have to let this happen. You can stop this. She studies him. The man who once told her silence was her only protection. The man who mistook compliance for consent. I already did, she says. For years. Elias lifts his hand slightly. The agents pause, waiting. This part doesn't require your presence, Elias tells Julian calmly. But it will require your cooperation. Julian laughs weakly. You think I'll just sit back and watch you ruin me? Elias meets his gaze. You already are. Another call comes through. Julian doesn't answer this one. He stares at the screen, shoulders sagging, the fight draining out of him as realization finally lands, not sharp, not sudden, but heavy and unavoidable. This isn't a single night. This is a reckoning. Outside the locked doors, movement stirs. Raised voices. The faint hum of cameras powering on. The murmur of a crowd that has found a new focal point. Nadira hears it before Julian does. The sound of a story escaping containment. The agent near the door checks his watch again. Press is gathering, he says. They've already caught wind of the clearance. Elias nods. Let them. Julian's head snaps up. No, he says. You can't let them. Elias doesn't look at him. He looks at Nadira. The truth doesn't need protection, he says quietly. It just needs daylight. Julian's phone vibrates violently in his hand now, call after call stacking until the screen is nothing but names and numbers and missed chances. He drops it. The device hits the carpet with a dull thud, screen still lit, still ringing, still broadcasting the collapse of everything he built on borrowed silence. The doors at the far end of the ballroom unlock. Not for him. For the world. And as the first camera flashes strobe against the glass, Nadira understands something with absolute certainty. Julian Cross's downfall has already begun. The first flash goes off before the doors are fully open. Light bursts through the glass in sharp, staccato pulses, white, relentless, hungry. Cameras surge forward as if pulled by gravity, voices rising over one another, questions tumbling out faster than answers can exist. Julian flinches. Nadira doesn't. She stands just inside the threshold, Elias's presence steady at her side, the jacket still wrapped around her shoulders like a boundary she no longer has to defend alone. The FBI agents move with practiced efficiency, forming a corridor through the chaos, guiding her forward while the noise swells on either side. Ms. Cole, did you know who he was? Is it true you were assaulted? Mr. Mercer, are these allegations connected to an ongoing investigation? The words blur together, dissolving into sound without meaning. They don't answer. They don't need to. The truth moves faster than statements ever could. By the time Nadira is seated in the back of a darkened vehicle, the story has already escaped containment. She watches it unfold on a muted screen mounted in the headrest, live feeds spliced with shaky phone footage, headlines forming in real time at the bottom of the frame. Philanthropy Gala ends in federal intervention. Business executive under scrutiny after public altercation. Questions rise over financial misconduct. The internet does what it always does. It devours. Clips circulate within minutes, Julian standing over her on the red carpet, his mouth twisted with contempt, the moment Elias steps between them, the doors closing, the flashes exploding as he's led away, no longer the center of control but the object of scrutiny. Comments flood in beneath the videos. Some cruel. Some curious. Some devastatingly precise. That look on his face when he realizes. She stayed calm the whole time. Notice how everyone else backed away from him. Nadira's phone vibrates in her lap. She doesn't look at it yet. She watches instead as a longer thread begins to form, screenshots, timelines, names redacted but patterns unmistakable. Other voices emerge, hesitant at first, then stronger as validation accumulates. This happened to me too. I thought I was the only one. I signed papers just like that. Secret number 4 reveals itself quietly. Not in a confession. Not in a revelation screamed from rooftops. In the realization that this moment of collective recognition is what she wanted all along. Not revenge. Not destruction. Truth. She never wanted Julian ruined. She wanted to be believed. The vehicle hums softly beneath her, the city sliding past in streaks of light. Elias sits beside her, silent, attentive, giving her space without withdrawing it. He watches her watch the world reframe her story in real time. For the first time, the silence feels gentle. Nadira lowers the screen. She closes her eyes. In the quiet, she hears her own breathing, steady now, even. The ache in her ribs pulses dully, no longer sharp. Her body is catching up to what her mind already knows. She is safe. Her phone vibrates again. This time, she looks. A single notification breaks through the flood. Julian Cross. Incoming message. Her chest tightens, not with fear, but with something closer to gravity. The past tugging, not to reclaim her, but to test whether it still has access. She doesn't open it. Not yet. Elias glances at the screen, then back to her face. You don't owe him anything, he says quietly. I know, she replies. Another vibration. Then another. Julian's name stays pinned at the top of her notifications, insistent, desperate. The man who once controlled the narrative now reduced to a blinking icon asking for her attention. Outside the vehicle, the city continues, people walking, lights changing, lives unfolding untouched by the collapse happening inside her phone. Nadira inhales slowly. She thinks of the nights she stayed silent to survive. Of the choices she made to protect herself when no one was watching. Of the years she carried the weight of a story that wasn't believed because it wasn't loud enough. Now the world is loud for her. She turns the phone face down in her lap. The screen goes dark. Elias watches her carefully, waiting. Nadira lifts her gaze, meeting his eyes. I need a moment, she says. He nods. Take all the time you need. The vehicle slows, pulling away from the chaos, leaving the cameras and questions behind. The city hum fades into a distant backdrop. Julian's message remains unread. Waiting. And Nadira knows that whatever she chooses next, silence or response, will be hers alone. She closes her eyes. And decides whether the past deserves an answer. The city is quiet where they stop. Not silent, never that, but muted, as if the world has turned its volume down out of respect. The building Elias brings her to doesn't announce itself. No sign. No crowd. Just glass, steel, and the soft glow of interior lights waiting patiently behind a locked door. Inside, the air smells clean. Warm. Like space meant for recovery. Nadira sits on the edge of a wide couch while Elias kneels in front of her again, this time with a first aid kit instead of authority at his back. He moves slowly, deliberately, cleaning the cut on her elbow with careful hands. The sting is brief, grounding. She exhales. You don't have to do that, she says. I want to, he replies. The words are simple. Unloaded. They don't demand gratitude or explanation. When he finishes, he doesn't rush away. He rests back on his heels, looking at her, not searching, not assessing. Just present. Outside the window, traffic flows like a distant river. Headlights blur into soft streaks of white and red. The city continues doing what it always does, moving forward. Nadira leans back into the cushions, the tension in her shoulders easing for the first time since the gala. The jacket still rests around her, familiar now, less a shield and more a reminder. Her phone buzzes. She picks it up without flinching this time. Not Julian. A bank notification. She frowns slightly, thumb hovering before she opens it. Deposit received. The number makes her breath catch. It's more money than she's seen in one place since before everything fell apart. Not a fortune, but enough to matter. Enough to change the texture of her life. She scrolls. A second notification follows, then a third. Reimbursements. Settlements. Accounts restored that she thought were gone forever. Unexpected restitution. Her chest tightens, not with greed, but with disbelief. With the quiet, disorienting sensation of being returned something she had already mourned. Elias watches her expression shift. It's the beginning, he says gently. Not an apology. Just accountability. She nods, swallowing hard. I didn't expect this. You weren't supposed to, he replies. That's the point. She sets the phone down between them. For a long moment, neither of them speaks. The silence is different now, not heavy, not waiting to wound. It's soft. Shared. The kind that exists when nothing needs to be defended. Nadira studies her hands, the faint tremor still lingering in her fingers. I thought, she says slowly, that when this happened, if it ever happened, I'd feel more. More what? Anger. Satisfaction. Relief. She exhales. I don't. Elias nods, unsurprised. Justice doesn't always feel like victory, he says. Sometimes it feels like room to breathe. She looks at him then. Really looks. Not the man who walked into the ballroom and shifted gravity, but the one kneeling in front of her now, sleeves rolled up, listening without interruption. I don't want to spend the rest of my life reacting to him, she says quietly. I know, he replies. I don't want him to be the reason for what I do next. Elias reaches out, resting his hand lightly over hers. He doesn't squeeze. He doesn't pull. Just contact. You don't owe your future to your past, he says. The words settle into her, warm and steady. Her phone vibrates again. This time, she turns it over without hesitation. Julian's name still sits there. Unread. Waiting. She studies it for a long moment, then unlocks the screen. Not to open the message. To delete it. The name disappears. The thread collapses. The space it occupied goes blank. Nadira exhales. The decision is small, but final. She looks up at Elias, something new sparking behind her eyes. Not anger. Not relief. Clarity. I know what I want to do, she says. He waits. She glances at the phone, at the numbers still glowing faintly on the screen, then out the window at the city she once survived in invisibly. I want to build something, she continues. Something that doesn't exist yet. Something for people who disappear the way I did. Elias's expression softens, not with surprise, but with recognition. Tell me, he says. A place, Nadira says slowly, the idea taking shape as she speaks. Resources. Legal help. Financial recovery. A way back that doesn't require silence. She meets his gaze, steady now. I don't want revenge, she says. I want repair. Elias nods once. Then that's what we'll do, he says. Nadira leans back into the couch, the weight of the night finally lifting enough for exhaustion to seep in. Her ribs still ache. Her body still remembers the floor. But her mind is already moving forward. She closes her eyes, the city's hum wrapping around her like a promise. And for the first time, the question isn't what Julian will lose. It's what she will build next. The room is bright this time. Light pours down from chandeliers that mirror the ones from the Harrington Grand Ballroom, cut crystal, warm gold, but the air feels different. Lighter. Open. The kind of space that invites breath instead of stealing it. Nadira stands near the edge of the room, hands loosely clasped in front of her, listening as voices settle into quiet. The hum of conversation fades, replaced by a collective stillness that feels intentional rather than shocked. A final silence. Not the silence that followed violence. The silence that follows arrival. She looks down at the red carpet beneath her feet. It's not the same carpet, not the same place, but the memory echoes clearly enough that her ribs ache in sympathy. For a moment, she sees it all again, the glare of lights, the cold shock of the floor, Julian's shadow stretching over her like a verdict. Then the image dissolves. Because she is standing. Whole. Steady. Unafraid. The crowd in front of her isn't dressed for spectacle. No flashing cameras. No raised phones. Just faces, attentive, present, waiting. People who know what it means to lose ground beneath their feet and rebuild it inch by inch. Elias stands off to the side, unobtrusive, his gaze steady on her. Not watchful. Not protective. Proud. Nadira steps forward. The sound of her heels on the floor is soft but deliberate, each step a quiet rebuttal to the idea that she ever needed permission to exist in spaces like this. She stops at the center of the room. For a heartbeat, she says nothing. She lets the silence do its work. I used to think survival was the end of the story, she says finally, her voice calm, grounded. That if you made it through, you were supposed to move on quietly. Be grateful. Not look back. A few heads nod. She shifts her weight, feeling the steadiness in her body, the absence of fear where it once lived. But survival is only the beginning, she continues. What matters is what you build after. She doesn't mention Julian. She doesn't need to. His absence is loud enough. When I disappeared, Nadira says, it wasn't because I was ashamed. It was because I was protecting myself in a world that didn't make room for me to be believed. She pauses, letting the words settle. This space exists so that no one else has to vanish to survive. She gestures subtly around the room, toward the quiet corners where counselors wait, toward the tables stacked with resources, toward the doors that stand open instead of guarded. A foundation, she says, is just a place where broken things are given the chance to hold weight again. Another silence follows. This one is full. Applause rises, not explosive, not performative, but deep and sustained. It fills the room, wraps around her, lifts something she didn't realize she'd been holding down. Nadira breathes. She steps back as the moment completes itself, the sound tapering naturally into quiet conversation. People move gently now, careful not to disturb the sense of arrival that still hums in the air. Elias joins her, offering a glass of water. She takes it, their fingers brushing briefly, an unspoken exchange that carries more meaning than any words could. You did that, he says quietly. She smiles. We did. Outside, the city glows. Not glaring. Not demanding. Just present. Later, when the room empties and the lights dim, Nadira lingers for a moment alone beneath the chandeliers. She looks up at them, at the way they scatter light across the ceiling, and remembers how those same reflections once felt like witnesses to her humiliation. Now they feel like markers. Of distance traveled. Of a story rewritten not through revenge, but through intention. She closes her eyes. Another silence. This one belongs entirely to her. When she opens them again, she turns toward the exit, toward the future waiting beyond glass doors that open without resistance. Somewhere far away, Julian Cross will spend the rest of his life explaining what happened to him, how everything slipped away, how the world turned against him in a single night. But Nadira will not be part of that explanation. She has no interest in being the lesson he tells. She is busy being the legacy he never saw coming. He kicked her thinking she was nothing. That mistake became his legacy.